security of our economy and of our country.
So your record on climate is a litany of broken promises.
We've seen the steel leave Steeltown.
Well, good evening, Taz and Nick. You know, going back to June 25th, 1968, 47 years ago, it was Trudeau-mania. Pierre Trudeau took over a massive, significant majority after Conservative rule. 47 years later today, this is before Justin was even born, we see Trudeau-mania Part 2, the sequel. The apple does not fall far from the tree. I think Justin Trudeau will be the new Prime Minister. I think he will also, bold prediction now, Nick, 171 seats by the end of tonight. They will have a majority. Justin Trudeau, evidently, according to Canadians.
To him. Nick Bontis, want to bring you back into the conversation for a moment. What we were hearing near the end from a lot of Conservative supporters is, could Justin Trudeau not just be a Prime Minister, but would you ever hire him to run a company? His resume, a little bit light, let's say, in terms of overall sort of political leadership, etc. That was a lot of the knocks that were coming at him. So, Nick, you're the business expert on this panel here. Justin Trudeau, 43 years old. What about that resume?
Well, let's face it, everybody knows about the resume. That's what the attack ads were all about. If you recall, there was a panel of people reviewing his resume. You know, the biggest motto of this whole election was that he wasn't ready. Clearly, that didn't work in terms of an attack ad strategy, because immediately after those attack ads, early on in August and September, the Liberal Party came back with ads of their own, with actually Justin saying on TV, I am ready. This is what I'm going to do. The problem is now there's no response from the other side. Once the guy says he's ready, now what are you going to do? Have a fight back and forth saying, I'm not ready, I am ready, I'm not ready? So it became ridiculous after the fact. And frankly, in terms of prime ministerial leadership that Alex was talking about, at the beginning, Justin was a little nervous in terms of the debate and the way he would speak as an orator, but towards the end, I found that he was the best speaker. He was very clear with his message, and that people started trusting in his ability to lead the country. So, frankly, he actually matured over these last 78 days more than anybody else.
Nick Bontis, just want to pick up with you. A lot of times people say in Canada that we don't necessarily vote in governments, we vote out governments. What are you sensing so far? Are we voting out Stephen Harper, or would we be voting in Justin Trudeau?
You know, clearly it's a little bit of both. There's an anti-Harper campaign out there that's loud and strong. I polled my students in class today at McMaster University, and virtually all the hands went up. And it's not so much that Justin was winning, but that people wanted change, that Harper had been around for too long, almost a decade, and the time was now for a little bit of change. I find the race so far fascinating. When you look at the last election, Ignatieff had 34 some odd seats during the election, and we're almost there for the Liberals, and the polls just ended here in Ontario. So just picking up on Marvin and Alex's comments, 78 days was a record. It was long, but it gave time for people to actually deliver the message, and I do think he matured over that period of time. But not only did Justin mature over that period of time, it also allowed some of the other party leaders to make mistakes, and not just the senior federal level leaders, but as we know, some of the local MPs also got caught up in some controversy, and I think that's why we see those numbers shaking out as they are. Well, I think it started falling from the beginning, let's face it. I mean, he had the lead that currently the Liberals possess today. He had it back in August. The niqab issue did not work in his favor. On the flip side, the economy was the message that the Liberals were screaming through the whole campaign moving forward. So that became very important. Also, the other issue that I found very interesting was that the NDP and the Conservatives wanted a balanced budget. And then the Liberals actually said they wanted a deficit for 3 years. So that's very, very interesting. The average Canadian is still not so confident about the economy. We still have remnants of the recession. And let's remind all our viewers out there that it was the Conservatives that actually steered us and navigated us through the recession in 2008, bringing us out of it more positioned, more healthy than any of the G8. Clearly, they didn't get any kudos for doing that. But Justin Trudeau, on the flip side, is promising 3 years of deficits, yet all of Canada is voting for him to win and start the government tomorrow. So that's very interesting. It's kind of analogous to the average household in Canada, or the average individual in Canada basically saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to start spending some money. But by the way, I'm going to put it all on credit card because, you know what, I don't want to pay now, I want to pay later. And that's what basically the Liberals are going to be doing. They're going to be investing heavily in infrastructure, and we're not going to be paying for it now, but you know what, Nick? We are going to be paying for it in future generations with higher interest rates.
Leading and elected. All right, let's speak of that panel right now. Gentlemen, the Liberals very, very close to majority territory. Nick Bontis, you called a 171 here. You care to change your prediction, maybe go even higher at this point?
I might have to go higher, Nick. Take me to Vegas now, Nick. I don't know.
No
My
kidding.
predictions have been pretty good the last couple of years. Let's talk about what happens next, okay? So obviously they're going to win. They may have a majority. Starting tomorrow, I remember the attack ads. He wasn't ready. They were looking at his resume, and then they would comment that he had great hair. But the real work starts, 3, 4, 5 years from now, like Obama did. His hair is going to turn a little bit gray on both sides because the work needs to be done. If you look at the numbers, Nick, if we got, let's say, 170 MPs in their seats, they had 30 some odd at dissolution. That means there's 140 some odd new people coming into Ottawa to do a very complex job, and that is stabilize the economy and the competitiveness of our nation. 140 people, they need to be managed. This is like an enterprise. Now we'll really find out if Trudeau has the management leadership capability to do this. That's going to be a tough job.
Turn the fortune of the Liberal Party around in one election cycle.
Yeah, we've gone from, as we said, about 30 some odd seats right up to 170, 180. It's a remarkable change, unfathomable. Nobody predicted this. If you look at all the polls leading up to this, Nick, even shows that we did together, no one had predicted that this was going to be a sea of red across the country. Nick Nanos did some polls on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and showed that there was an actual increase for the Liberals. So what that actually tells me is that when it comes to polls, momentum is more important than the actual percentage. They had the Liberals in the lead, but nowhere near as much as where we're seeing right now. So the actual momentum took them really high. Locally here in Hamilton, Christopherson, Duval, Tassie, Brettina, congratulations. We got orange in the middle, reds on the outsides, on either side of Hamilton there. I'm very impressed with Brettina, obviously, where he's come from in the media, municipal politics and the mayor, and now moving on to Ottawa. He's making quite a career for himself. So interesting that we also have a little bit of red splash here in our local community in Hamilton.
Pundit hat for the moment, and just talk to me as Nick Bontis, and I want to know your take on the impact of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, a Liberal Prime Minister, tonight.
Sure, Nick. A couple things just me as Nick Bontis. First of all, my employer, McMaster University, I'm a professor. Tuition was an issue during this campaign. Justin Trudeau has now won the election. The Liberal platform was that they would actually have tuition repayment in terms of interest for loans, which is a big issue for university students, only triggered after a student was making $25,000 a year in annual income or more. I think that's a fantastic idea. I also think that it's realistic. It's one thing to promise something, but if it's not realistic to implement, then it's not going to work out. On the flip side, the Green Party came out in their platform and said they wanted to abolish tuition entirely for university students by year 2020. I just think that's unrealistic. When I polled my students earlier this morning, they like the idea of making a minimum amount of income before the interest rates would be triggered. So kudos to Trudeau and making sure that we implement that now that he's in power. The second issue closer to home, Nick, as you know, is my involvement with soccer. And the Canadian Soccer Association in particular. Bal Gosal was the Minister of Sport. He's a Conservative from Brampton. He lost tonight. So I'm going to be working very closely with somebody new who's going to be the Minister of Sport. Don't know who that is, but we made a heavy investment here in Hamilton in a brand new stadium. We actually hosted, the best Women's World Cup in history across Canada, as well as the Pan Am Games here in Hamilton. Want to make sure this new Minister of Sport, whoever Justin decides it's going to be, that I can work closely with that individual, him or her, so we can bring, that stadium to capacity and make sure we get the biggest bang out of our investment. So those are two kind of personal issues for me as a result of the election tonight, Nick.
Expect to hear from him now that he's going to be the Prime Minister.
Well, he can't ride the fence any longer. I think the excuse that he used was, if I recall, he was quoted as saying, I want to see the details or the fine print, and I don't know the fine print. So, well, guess what? Now he has the luxury as Prime Minister to look at all the fine print he wants. Obviously, he's going to modify it because it can't be conceived as a conservatively designed trade deal. So he's going to put his own kind of flavor on it, making sure that, of course, it does not fall apart. I don't think Justin Trudeau wants the trade deal to fall apart. I think genuinely he believes that this is the way to go. History tells us in Canada that we are a trading nation, and as our trading partners become viable and move on, so does Canada. So I think the Liberal government will want the deal to go ahead, but Trudeau will put his own kind of flavor to it to identify it as something that's been stamped with the approval of the Liberals.
How are other world leaders going to perceive him? How will he translate on the world stage and be taken seriously?
Well, I think that's actually the big challenge ahead of us, especially on the world stage. I did see a cartoon of Justin Trudeau negotiating with Putin and trying to put Putin in his place. Obviously, I don't think that's going to happen. But I think, you know what, Justin's got multifaceted characteristics. You know, he was in campaigning mode for the last few weeks. So, you know, I'd mentioned earlier in the telecast that he was quite robotic at the beginning, but then became a little bit more natural when he spoke. I think we're going to see a metamorphosis of his personality now that he's the leader. He doesn't have the stress, you know, of trying to win a campaign. He's won it now, and by a landslide. He's in power. So I think that you're going to see a maturation process with Justin. You know, he's not going to roll any heads, you know, in terms of the international global economy. He's going to have to be friends with everybody. Could you just imagine a year from now with the U.S. election, let's say Donald Trump wins down there. Could you imagine Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau having a discussion in Ottawa over some coffee and drinks? I mean, that'll be quite a fascinating type of setting, a visual that no one would have ever predicted. But you know what? We could be here next fall with a Donald Trump Justin Trudeau summit.
Well, you can only imagine the hair comments you get on online voting as well to try to perhaps boost those numbers too.
I'm glad you brought this issue up, Nick. I was thinking about it throughout this evening, and as well as you know, with my students earlier today when we discussed the issue of voter turnout. Obviously, we do know that there's quite a level of apathy when it comes to the young millennials. Online voting or online polling, whatever you want to call it, obviously is going to make a huge difference. I agree wholeheartedly with Alex. It's something that we have to look into, and if anybody's going to look into it, it's going to be a 43-year-old young prime minister to be in terms of Justin. He was the one that actually had a very good handle on social media with Facebook and Twitter and all the types of tools that millennials are interested in. You know, we got 4 years, let's say, till the next election, more than enough time to consider all types of options, even if it's not for the real election itself, maybe for the advanced voting, we could go to online polling, and that would help some students who are 18 years of age or older. I mean, let's face it, Nick, it's the year 2015. I mean, the average person can go online right now, buy a first-class ticket to Tokyo on an airline for $5,000. You can surely create a system that allows us to safely go online to vote for our next prime minister.
That would be secure enough, yeah.
I think his first order of business is the stabilization of the economy. I mean, I think that's critical. At the end of the day, it's still about the economy. The whole issue of leadership has gone away now because he's won. So Canadians have voted and said, you know what, Justin, we think you are ready. So I think economy was one issue, leadership was another. The results of tonight show that they believe in his leadership. Now it's about the economy. Let's figure out what we're going to do. This idea of the deficit over the next 3 years, it's going to start scaring some people tomorrow morning when they wake up and realize, hey, we're going to have a deficit position. We still have significant debt in this country. We still have significant household debt in this country. So if interest rates start to rise, what's going to happen to people's ability to pay for the things that they need, the housing, the food, transportation? I think these are very, very critical issues that are going to come to the fore tomorrow morning when people wake up.
And have they already started reacting overseas?
Yeah, that's a great question, Taz. I think that the markets already had Liberals winning the election predicted and embedded in the markets today. Nobody predicted the majority. Well, some of us predicted a majority, but not to this extent. But I think the markets are actually going to be positive tomorrow. I don't see any potential crashes or any scare or any fear in the markets at all. I think it'll be steady as you go in terms of the stock market reaction, specifically on the TSX for tomorrow morning.
All right, Nick, hold tight just for a second.